honestly, I never even thought about at the time, that the paparazzi part would play into it, or that like, oh, that me being known as like my parents' daughter would affect anything. I think in any case, I was more worried that if the public did know, and at the time, I think in Hong Kong, it was even more conservative than it was now, people would judge my parents.
Welcome to Proudly Asian, a podcast series that tells bold and proud stories of Asians by Asians. I'm Michael Wong, a financial journalist who wants to uncover the many Asian stories around us that are waiting to be told. There's never just one way to look at Asians. This podcast will take you through a deep dive into the life stories, struggles, and triumphs of young Asians around the world. On today's episode, we have Kayla Wong, an LGBTQ plus advocate and founder of concept store Lang. Born and raised in Hong Kong, Kayla has been an outspoken advocate for LGBTQ plus representation. She talks to us about her experience growing up queer in Hong Kong and finding her own identity while spending the majority of her life in the limelight. Welcome back to another episode of Pride Special Proudly Asian. So for our listeners from Hong Kong, you might have come across Kayla's name for the LGBTQ plus advocacy work that she's been doing in the city before she moves to LA, her current home. And this week, I'm so glad that she's able to join us all the way from California to talk about her story and the new ventures that she might be working on. So welcome to Proudly Asian, Kayla. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm super excited to be on the podcast with you, Isabel. And I'm really excited to chat about like my new projects and like just, have a good chat.
I know you recently moved to LA, so I'm so excited to hear about what you've been working on and like how's everything over in California. But before we get started with the conversation, for our listeners who would like to know more about you, why don't we start with some quick questions that I normally ask every single guest of mine on Proudly Asian, which is tell us about your background. Who are you? What are you? And where did you grow up?
So, who am I? I am Kayla. I consider myself an entrepreneur. I go by she, her. I am proud and out as a lesbian. I have a wife. We got married last year. And yeah, 2 months ago, we decided to move here to LA. Just kind of changing our base. We're still very much part of the Hong Kong community. But yeah, just needed a change of scenery. I grew up in Hong Kong, so it's, always home to us, me, and both my wife Elaine, she's also from Hong Kong. So Hong Kong was very much Hong Kong to us. Yeah.
I know that a lot of people in Hong Kong and Asia would have first come across your name or learned of you as the child of actor Michael Wong and supermodel Janet Ma. But I'm just wondering if that ever influenced the way that you were brought up or your experience in Hong Kong during your formative years.
I think definitely there has been, I think my childhood in a way was very different from some people in the way that I think we were exposed to a lot of things and people at a very young age. We were trained to be really good at socializing with people. I think that's something that I actually didn't realize until as now that I'm an adult, that it was actually a really good skill that I was able to garner because especially in the work that I do now, being able to communicate with people, being able to make connections, network is very, very important. And I think another part would be that, we also grew up where people were always, watching us in a way. We Hong Kong is a pretty small city, and because of my parents, because they did take us everywhere. People were really interested in our life and what we did. And when I was growing up, especially in my teenage years or when I was in college, because, I was going through, like, I guess basically what every teenager or college kid would be like experimenting, trying new things. And I got a lot of scrutiny during that time, like I got paparazzi shots of me like smoking or like out in Lan Kwai Fong, which is the party area in Hong Kong. And then eventually I also was caught, with my then uh, girlfriend partner, basically on a date. But it just kind of then turned into this whole thing. But so I guess, in that way, obviously, the way that I grew up was quite different, because, my every move was kind of watched and I had to not be careful, but like my parents would always be like, you guys have to be um, more aware of how you're acting because, people are watching and um, you want to behave a certain way, I guess. But at the time, I think I was pretty rebellious and I didn't really care. And I think that's why, now that I've come out, I've always been kind of like really proud of who I am, despite of everything, just because I just never really wanted to care too much about what other people thought. I didn't want other people to dictate my life. So yeah, I guess that's kind of the gist of it.
That must be quite an experience, and it's quite different to like just any regular kids who grew up in the city, because like I can imagine growing up it might be a bit hard for you to find people who could relate to your experience, and in a way you were just basically going about your day doing things that regular people would do, and suddenly that would make headlines. So it must be quite an experience. But I also understand that in Hong Kong and the majority of Asia are quite conservative or even backward when it comes to the acceptance of LGBTQ plus community. And given that your life received such degree of scrutiny, like you mentioned, I'm so curious about your coming out experience. Was it hard for you to come out to your friends and family? Or was it because that your life was kind of public, so it made it a little bit easier?
Yeah, to be honest, that part, it didn't really concern me so much. I think when it comes to coming out to your family or your parents, so much of it has to do with whether or not you feel like you're disappointing them. And I honestly, I never even thought about at the time, that the paparazzi part would play into it or that, like, oh, that me being known as like my parents' daughter would affect anything. I think in any case, I was more worried that if the public did know, and at the time, I think in Hong Kong, it was even more conservative than it was now, people would judge my parents, especially in the Asian culture, as like, like, how did they raise me as parents? Like, why would I become gay? I think that was kind of my main concern. But when it came to actually coming out, so much of it had to do, and I think any person who is part of the LGBTQ plus community would understand like coming out to your family is probably the biggest weight in the sense where because they are your closest people and you trust them and you love them the most, and if they come back to you and they're like, we don't accept this, friends or peers or people that I've met over the years who have talked to me so much about just not being able to come out fully to their families have really hindered like how they go about their relationships or like how they even go about being themselves. They don't fully feel like they're themselves, and it mainly stems from the family support. Like I think family support is so important for any LGBTQ plus person. And ultimately, I'm just really grateful that with my experience, I guess I'll touch on it a little bit as well. I've told this story many times, but at the time when I came out to my parents, my mom was actually quite reactive. She wasn't really accepting at first. She kind of saw it as a phase. I actually came out to her twice. The first time I was kind of caught with like my girlfriend in high school, And at the time, she was a little calmer because I guess I was younger, and she was just like, "Oh, this is a phase. It's fine. You'll get over it." And then when I was in college, I had a more serious girlfriend, and she actually caught me again and, like, pushed me to, like, kind of tell her, that this person was actually my girlfriend, and she got really upset. She was really I wanna say she was angry, but I don't think she was angry at me. I think she was just angry at the situation, and we got into this huge fight. This was, like, I was coming back, to Hong Kong from, LA because I was in school in LA at the time. Was coming back to Hong Kong, and I was on a Christmas break, and basically the whole break, like, we didn't talk, and I was quite upset because in my head, I mean, during the fight, we also discussed this, which was like, she's in the fashion industry, people are supposed to be more open-minded, like, there are a lot of gay men, gay people around. She has gay friends, and, I just was so frustrated and couldn't understand why she couldn't accept me if she had friends that were, and I think at the time, she was just so stuck on the idea of her, like, wanting her daughter to be able to get married in the traditional way with a man, and have children, like, that was something that she always saw for her kids, and I guess, it kind of threw her a curveball, and so it took her some time, but I think going back to, me being really grateful is that I think it took her a couple months basically, and she kind of came to her senses on her own. And one day she sent me a text and was like, I'm, you know, it doesn't matter who you love. Like, I just want you to be happy. And, you will always be my daughter. And that just kind of changed everything. And since then, we've kind of become, uh, like on a friend level. Like, I tell her everything, she knows everything. And I honestly, I wish that for everybody.
I guess for a lot of Asian LGBTQ plus community members, this coming out story or like the worries that you went through, like a lot of them also went through. And it's also like a learning journey on both parts as well for the parents and for the people who are trying to come out themselves to their families. But I'm just wondering, after this experience and after all these years, being an active advocate in the LGBTQ plus community, if you could ever give your younger self some advice, what would it be? What is it that you want to say to her?
Oh man, to be honest, I have to say, I think the world we live in now is so different than even just 10 years ago. I think now kids are way more open to information. They know so much more. They're a lot more assertive, and then they're a lot more sure of who they are at a younger age. And so I guess for me, like, if I were to tell myself something as a younger person, I would say be patient with your journey. Um, know that it takes time to become who you are. I think recently I turned 30 last year, and I think literally after I hit that mark, I realized, like, it took me this long to really understand and realize who I am truly as a person. Um, and also to understand that you're ever evolving as a human as well. Like, there is kind of no stopping point. There's no goal as a human being, I think. You're just constantly learning and constantly improving yourself. And I think when I was younger, I was very impatient with work, with where I was as a person. I was very critical of myself. I think both physically and both, in work and also in the way that I handled relationships. And I think, yeah, it really takes time, and just be patient with yourself and be kind to yourself. I think that's very important.
And like you just mentioned, because we live in a completely different times, like when you were growing up, there was no social media, right? Your life would basically, I'm not saying it's better, but it's like the print media was pretty much what could really give comments about your life if that's an accurate description. But these days we live with social media, and I know that last year when the news of you getting married came out, there were also people who would comment online, and like it just reflects how, like, even for kids who are growing up these days, there's no way for them to escape social media. And it's so easy for just any strangers to go on their social media pages and just comment on whatever they're wearing, whatever they're doing. So I'm just wondering, from your point of view, if you also have any advice for people who are growing up with social media, and because it's so easy for them to form their identities based on people's comments online.
That's interesting because even when you brought up the fact that there were comments on my wedding, I had no idea because I don't read any of the comments. Uh, and I think that's part of it, you know. I am actually very quick to delete any comments on my page that I find offensive or rude. And to be honest, I think A, that that is a very okay thing to do. B, it kind of protects your mental health. Social media is a platform for us to be expressive of ourselves, right? It is a place to feel liberated, I think, almost, to tell your own story. You know, I think back in the day, like, I almost want to compare the print media to now, at least in my case. Now I feel I get to take control of the narrative. You know, I get to tell my story from my side. Um, and people obviously will always have comments, like, even if it's not on social media, people can, you know, I think in high school, a lot of kids will understand people can backstab you and talk about you behind your back, and that can be really mean and horrible things, but it is how you deal with it and how you face the criticism is what's going to, you know, show you who you are as a person. And me saying that I delete comments doesn't mean that I'm, like, shutting down people, right? I think I only delete comments that are actually I find offensive because I think in Hong Kong or maybe around the world, I don't know, but, like, in Hong Kong, at least, for me and my sister, the media really like to focus on our physical appearance, especially, our, general boob area. And so, a lot of times, you know, we would get comments that are just referring to specific body parts, and those are the comments that I would take off just because I don't really find that it adds to the conversation. If it does, you know, I'm very happy to have conversations with people. I also think that that is the way to learn. That is the way to open up your mind. And I would say the same to younger people, you know. Um, if you have a platform, if you have a social media account, have conversations with people, you know, have conversations with people who might not think the same as you. I think it's important to learn from different angles, learn from different kinds of people, and understand that the world is very big, very vast. There are a lot of different opinions, but as long as you're able to take it in and not take it personally, and even if there are days that you take it personally, where there are days, I think, especially when I was younger, that they would get to me, you know, when people would be like, "Oh, you're ugly, you look like, you know, some weird person or whatever." Um, just brush it off, you know that their opinion shouldn't matter because you know who you are. And like I said before, just be kind to yourself and know what you stand for. And that's really all you can do.
That's a very important tip, because I like how you mentioned sometimes you won't even give power to those comments by like not reading them or just completely deleting or dismissing them. So it's really important for young people these days to choose what they give power to in terms of criticism and comments, and sometimes just detach those comments to their life, because they just need to know that whatever people say, most of the time it doesn't reflect the truth about themselves. But I do have this question, which is like, Hong Kong is such an international city, but from what you described just now, it seems that the city is really slow when it comes to embracing the LGBTQ plus community. I'm wondering if you have a take on why that is the case.
I think that is actually a very interesting topic because I actually think that the general public are a lot better with accepting, you know, the LGBTQ plus community. I don't really think a lot of people have a problem with, you know, seeing people holding hands on the street or like, um, you know, like people knowing or like having gay friends. I think it's comes down to more generational, where, usually the parents are not too accepting, or people find it hard to come out to their parents. Uh, I think the younger people very much so are very accepting. And to be honest, in the last couple years, there have been not a lot of progress, but there have been progress in the side where, there have been cases that have been won for the LGBTQ plus community. But then you also get like a little backlash. I think I want to say, the last 2 years, I do feel like there has been a shift where I think we were kind of moving in a direction where, okay, yes, we want more representation. We want to see more gay people because they are part of the community. And I know that actually a lot of corporate companies do really well on this front. I actually participate in quite a few of like their, Pride Month events and stuff like that. And that the bigger corporations that are in Hong Kong still do great work in supporting their communities. I think it's just when it comes to legislation, when it comes to the government, it's just h hard for them, I guess, to kind of get over this hump of really being more supportive of the LGBTQ plus community, and I can't really say why. I think there are a lot of factors that go into it. Ultimately, Hong Kong is a very small city, and there are opinions that can't be, um, shut down on that front. But I do know that there are a lot of people who are fighting for the rights of the LGBTQ plus community in Hong Kong. Like the Marriage Equality Foundation, they do great work. And obviously Pink Dot as well, they do great work. So there are a lot of small pockets of people who are, trying to bring the community together, trying to give voice to the people. I think it's just yeah, it's just going to be like a longer journey than most. But at least, our neighbor Taiwan is doing great. So if we ever need if we ever need some support there, they're a great one. Yeah.
I guess definitely it's not just like a Hong Kong problem because even in the States or like Taiwan, when an issue touches so many people, it's really just hard to get 100% of the population to agree on one thing, right? And I think even for Taiwan, I remember working on a documentary about LGBTQ plus community a few years ago. When I was interviewing some of the professors there, I asked them, why is Taiwan so open about accepting LGBTQ plus community? He was telling me basically, oh, it's not really the case because it's like for a lot of rural areas, there are still a lot of old people who don't accept it. And even though they have made such progress, Taiwan is still like 50-50 when it comes to acceptance for LGBTQ plus community. So I could only imagine if for Taiwan being a little bit more progressive, it's still 50-50. It probably explains why it still takes a bit of time for Hong Kong to accept that because we're balancing the opinions of more than 7 million people. But moving on, I would like to take a deep dive into the advocacy work that you've been doing or even like issues that are currently facing the LGBTQ plus community. I know you mentioned in a previous interview that you used to live a highly visible life. Basically, you used to find that quite inconvenient. But the turning point for you was the realization that living a highly visible life could also mean that you have a platform to advocate for the issues that you care about. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so after I came out, that's actually when I made my account public, because I realized in Hong Kong at the time when I came out, which was like, I guess about 10 years ago, there really wasn't much representation. I felt like the younger generation just didn't have anybody to look up to or to see that, it is normal to have, or it can be normal to have a relationship with, a same-sex partner. And after I, became really kind of outspoken about my journey and just kind of being myself on social media, I realized it did really help a lot of people. And, I get so much feedback of, oh, it's so great to be able to see what you and, your partner have. And it really gives me hope. And, I try to have a lot of conversations with people who, sent me messages, or, even when I had like open chats on my page. It kind of gave people a channel to understand more about, what it's like to have a same sex, I guess, relationship. Not that it really is that much different than having a heterosexual one, but also just giving space for younger people to ask questions and be vulnerable, and to get support that they might not normally get from, their family or elsewhere if they haven't come out yet. So yeah, I think that was kind of where I was like, I hope that what I'm doing is, helping somebody. And that's kind of why I continue to share me and my wife's story now is, especially now that we're married, I do think it does give people, a glimpse of hope that they can have that as well one day. And yeah, but honestly, like you said just now, like everywhere in the world has its own problems, like even in the US currently with the transphobia that you can see, in the South is quite horrible, honestly, to say, that they're banning drag queen shows. It's really quite polarizing. And just the fact that other people feel the need to govern or rule other people's lives that don't really matter to them is quite frustrating to me. And I think that's kind of what I felt growing up as, a person who was under the limelight all the time, is that, I didn't really like the fact that people felt that they could comment on my life. And I guess that's why I've been so fiercely, kind of standing up for the LGBTQ plus community, because I felt that even before realized I was part of the LGBTQ plus community. It's quite hard in Hong Kong because I think people are still relatively shy, but like I said, previously, that there are more and more groups of pockets of people who are now, coming up and trying to create their own little community, trying to give voice, and I think that's honestly so great to see, and I hope that at some point I will come back to Hong Kong and be able to do something, great for the community. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with how you mentioned just now. Like, you're also showing people who look like you, or even just kids who are in the LGBTQ plus community, if they are ever wondering if their family and friends could accept them, they can basically just show, hey, like a cool person like Kayla came out and she married, she has a wife. It's okay to be in a same sex marriage, because young people can use you as a role model and example to show their friends and family that all is good. There's really no problem to be gay, to be lesbian, to be queer. There's nothing stopping people like you to continue doing great work and being cool, right? So that definitely carries weight for a lot of young people these days. And we did talk a lot about that during this conversation. We know that, in Asian cultures, they tend to be a little bit more modest and less willing to be loud and proud about being gay, being LGBTQ plus, as opposed to the Western crowd, right? So I'm just wondering, I know that you are still going to engage with the LGBTQ plus communities in LA, and you might have more learnings after that. But at this point, I'm wondering, in your view, if there's ever an effective way for us to promote for LGBTQ plus acceptance and representation in Asia, given the cultural nuances that we have to navigate.
Yeah, so I think it is essential to have little small groups of people, like I said before, where I've been to a lot of corporate events, where big companies would host, not just during Pride Month. I know that they actually have support groups throughout the year, where people actually get to come together, get to, meet people within their company that have similar stories or backgrounds. And I know a lot of, companies that have Western influences really support their employees in the ways that, they have not, I don't want to say their rule books, but, they encourage their employees to be respectful, to, embrace their colleagues who might be LGBTQ plus, They try to encourage them to share their story. Like, I feel like a lot of these little events really kind of help people understand what it's like for anybody who is not out or anybody who is out, what they're facing, what their challenges are, how we can deal with them as allies. I think that's super important. You know, it's LGBTQ plus is not just about our little community. It's about the allies that we have, that support that we have. Like I said from the beginning, family support to me, I think, is crucial for any person that is trying to come out or that is trying to become who they want to become. Um, and yeah, I just feel like if we can have more little conversations here and there for the people, for the community, I think we can be doing a lot better. And obviously, I think with representation also is so important. I think in the last couple of years, we've been able to see a lot more campaigns, a lot more brands being more open about supporting the LGBTQ plus community in Hong Kong. And I find that to be super inspiring. Like last year, I was able to be part of an ad that was focused on LGBTQ plus couples, and it was for like an home insurance. And I thought that was really, really great because it really showed that, we also want homes. We also want love. And that's really what we're looking for. And for a corporate brand to support that and to put it out there, but even back then when Cathay did their um, couple, even though it did get backlash, I think that was so great to kind of just even have that out there. That really does make a huge difference for people. Yeah.
I remember lately, I'm not sure if you have seen that, but in India, there's also like a Starbucks commercial that features kind of like an Indian parent showing acceptance to his transgender daughter or son. That sparked quite a bit of backlash in India. And I do think that's definitely an opportunity for education and conversations, because any conversations that you can have about the community is a good start. So, before we move on to the next segment, I just have one more question for you. For this Pride Month, if there's one message that you want to share to the world on behalf of the LGBTQ plus community, what is it that you want to say?
I think what I want to say is that we honestly are just looking for love. We just want to be ourselves and we want to be part of the community. We aren't trying to take anything away from anybody. We're not trying to impose anything on anybody. We honestly just want to be respected as human beings, and just to be loved for who we are and to be able to love who we want to love. I think it's really just that simple.
Amazing. And now it's time for us to move on to the next segment, which is called Rapid Bias. And in this segment, I'll be asking my guests biased questions that they've got asked at some points in life. And in Kayla's case, some biased questions that she's been asked about her sexual orientation. So, Kayla, are you ready?
Yes.
All right, let's go. First question is just a face.
Yeah, so I think that was the question that I got a lot when I was in my teenage years. Not just from my parents, but even with my friends at the time. I think, yeah, it was just. I think it was not just me. Like I know so many other people that have gotten this phrase before, and it isn't just a phase. I think at this point it's like just respect who you want to love. Like love is love. Yeah.
Yep, I agree. And the next one, but she looks like a girl.
Yeah, so this one is funny because some of my friends used to say that to me when I would introduce my partner to them, and they couldn't understand why my partner had long hair and wasn't like a tomboy. Like they had a very typical idea of what lesbians are, and they were like, "Oh, but she looks like a girl." Like, and I'm like, "Well, I'm a lesbian." so that's kind of it should make sense. But yeah, for a while it was just something that it took time for them to like wrap their head around. Yeah.
Yeah, or people always ask that question, like, oh, so who's the guy, who's the girl?
Yeah.
And the next one is, but you're so pretty.
Yeah, I think people would probably see that as a compliment. But again, it was at the time, it was friends of mine that would, I think also even, I guess, maybe it's an Asian thing. Like they just saw it as like, oh, you're wasting your, I don't know, quota. Like it's more worth it to be with the guy, I guess. I don't know. It's quite, again, like a funny way to put it. But yeah, I did get that at some point. Yes.
And the next question is, I thought you wanted to have kids one day.
Yeah. Again, I think that was, back in the day when people had a more conservative view of the fact that you had to be in a heterosexual relationship to have children. Obviously, now we're super lucky that, science and advancement have come a long way. And me and my wife are actually thinking and looking to have children at some point, and science allows that to happen. So, yeah, super grateful.
And finally, how does sex work though?
Yeah, I do get that. I did get that. I think I do still get that sometimes, actually. But yeah, but it's to me, it's actually not a bad thing. It's curiosity. It's good for people to ask and to understand and to be like, oh, okay, so that's how it works. I actually, even in college, I was super open with. I had a friend who's now my best friend, actually, out here. She used to ask me all of these questions when I told her I was gay, and I just saw it as somebody trying to get to know, my culture or like my background or what I'm about. And I think if you ask the right questions, you are able to understand people so much more and to connect with them so much more. Yeah, so I encourage it, honestly.
But probably not the first question that someone should ask a stranger when they come across.
Probably
like...
not.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for playing this round of Rapid Bias, Kayla. Now, for us to wrap up the episode, we talked about during the conversation that you got married last year. Congratulations, by the way. And now you are currently building a base in LA. So I'm just wondering what's next for you? Any exciting projects that you're working on currently?
Now that I'm based in LA, I've actually started a new venture. I haven't started yet, but I'm in the process of starting it. We're hoping to launch later this year. But basically, I am trying to create a concept store out here. And, I when I was in Hong Kong, I was really into supporting indie and local Hong Kong brands because, there's a lot of good talent out there. And I think that the side of the world should get to see that. So the plan is to bring those Hong Kong brands here and to, yeah, hopefully have people get to know Hong Kong, the creative side of Hong Kong more.
Amazing. I can't wait to see that becoming a reality. And finally, one last question for you, Kayla. What does it mean to be proudly queer and Asian to you?
I think it means so much. I think, over the years, I've really come to learn who I am, to really embrace both sides, being queer and being Asian. I think for a long time, I was struggling a lot with the Asian side of it because I aligned myself so much with the Western culture. But then in the last couple of years, I think I've become more and more proud of being Asian because there are a lot of things that I am proud of, growing up with, certain values that I think only Asians have, the discipline, the respect you have for your elders. Like a lot of these little things, as you grow old, you find them to be so much more important than you did when as a kid. Um, and, I think being queer as well, being able to be a proudly out Asian, I find that to be super empowering. And hopefully, with my story, I am able to help more queer Asians embrace their true selves as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us to share your story with us, Kayla.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for this episode of Proudly Asian. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at proudly.asian for more content. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and signing off for now. I'm Isabel Wong.